I think probably the hardest part as a parent for us, when it comes to them having a relationship with God, we have to partner with God because he knows them better than we do. I think sometimes we think, well, we're the parent and we're responsible, but God knows them better. There is a level of decision making that our kids will own. And as a parent, our job is just to cultivate the best soil in their heart for them to make the best choices. But at the end of the day, they will make their choices.
So what does the Bible say? Hey, everyone. Welcome to this podcast session. We're excited that you're here. I'm here with some friends, as usual. We've got Pastor Robert and Natalie Favela here with us, which is awesome. And Tracia is back on the pod, which is...
Is that what you call it?
Yeah, sure. Wow. Yeah, and we're excited. Listen, if you were able to come out to our parenting workshop, we were so glad you were able to be there. We hope you got a lot out of that. FYI, we will be posting soon the audio so that those that missed it will be able to listen, maybe even watch. I think at least the audio will be posted, so we're excited about that. But in this whole process this year with Grow and the discipleship area of the church, we're trying to produce more and more resources, as I've said over and over again. And one of the things we want to continue to do is have this back and forth with you guys in the church about different topics. And so at the parenting workshop, we asked you to send in your questions. And guys, we got some questions to no surprise. And we're grateful for all of those questions that came in. And what we're going to do today is, unfortunately, what we can't do is line by line, question by question, go through every single question that came in. But what we're going to try to do is break off into chunks questions that relate to a certain topic. And we're going to just talk about that topic together. Really quick, I think most people listening would know generally who we all are, but why don't we at least do this? And each of us can say the ages of our kids so that everybody knows kind of what season of parenting we're in. I would be the least experienced parent here. My kids are 7, 5, and 3. And so I'm still in that young little stage. And Tracy, how old are your kids?
I feel like I'm still in the least experienced stage too. My oldest son is 20. I have another son who's 16, and my daughter will be 12 in just a few weeks.
Okay. That's much more experience than me.
No.
What about the Favelas?
Yeah, our kids, my son Jude is 10, and our daughter Numi is 8.
Okay. So we've got ages 3 to 20 represented here on the parenting spectrum. And so what we're going to do is dive right into it. And the first subject that I just want to bring up has to do with we got lots of questions having to do with how do we as parents help our kids grow spiritually, or what does discipleship look like in the home? How do I encourage a spiritual hunger? I'll just read a couple of the things. How do you instill God into their lives? What do you do if there's a parent in the home that's not a believer? How do you get your kids interested in reading, studying the Bible? And we don't have to address all of these at once, but we could start wherever. Well, why don't we pause before I read 10 more questions and just open the subject of what does it look like to help our kids grow spiritually? Because that's it feels to me as a parent like a monumental task. And I think being a younger parent, I've had, prior to having kids, or maybe when I first had my first kid, I had like this idealized vision in my head of how I was going to lead my home spiritually. And, we were going to do in-depth Bible studies every night, and we were going to worship and usher in the presence of God. Absolutely. Visions of angels, all kinds of stuff. And, that's been reduced down to, at bedtime, I sing a worship song and I do sing.
Oh, Lord.
I didn't say well, but I do sing. The kids, though, are ignoring me half the time. I'm reading a Bible verse and they're goofing around, not listening. And so we could have a vision of what we think it looks like on paper to cultivate spirituality in our home or disciple our kids or help our kids grow spiritually. And then you have reality, which quickly sets in as you begin to try to implement certain things. But I'm guessing that's not to say that this is impossible. And we all feel the weight and the responsibility to do this. But let me pause there. That's my little introduction to the subject. We could start anywhere on this. Any thoughts, any ways that you guys are approaching this endeavor to help your kids grow spiritually?
Yeah, I think I'll just start off. This is for me before, jumping into any like practice or tactic, if you will. The part that helps me out the most is having the right mindset. Some people might call it theology, but what is your thinking around your role for helping your children be shaped by God? Natalie and even my friends know I love to garden. I'm not the best gardener, but I love it. It's cathartic. I love being out in the yard. But what kind of flawed mindset would I have if I believed I was the one who made my plants grow? Right. I know that I am not the one who puts the design and the power into my shrubs growing or small plants being cultivated. However, I am the one who gets to cultivate the garden, who gets to work with what I understand happens naturally with things. I understand naturally that you cannot let weeds fester. That would be an example. So I have to do things. I would know that they have to get their proper nutrients. I know that they have to get watered. So I'm using that all as a working illustration because I've been in seasons where I've taken way too much of the burden on of I am responsible for making my kids spiritually grow. And that's just not true. I have a role to play, but what am I doing to be able to prepare the lane, if you will, to manage to or cultivate what God has already put in them, what he's put in the community around us, so that it can promote growth. And so that's just kind of probably where I would start before I even jump into any practice.
Yeah, I think when I think of the topic of like spirituality and children, I think a lot of the times we can abdicate a little bit. If you go to a good church, like our kids love coming to church, you can be like, well, they'll take care of it on Sunday, and then I'll kind of fill in the blanks. They go to a Christian school, right? So I think sometimes we can do a little bit of that. But really zooming out, I would say when it comes to any kind of relationship with God, part of it is seasonal. Like, so if we're talking about, your kids, Garrett, like when Jude and Numi were that age, we got little tiny spurts of, hey, we'd go out, you go out to the park with the kids, right? And you're like, look at all the different colors of flowers. Like God made so many different, like, it's really just when kids are little, there's a lot of like awe. There's a lot of just pointing out where God already is in the everyday life. You're not giving them, even memorizing Bible verses, like that's great. But we've experienced with a 10-year-old, he can tell you all the Beatitudes. He can tell you now whether or not that translates to home life with his sister. That's a different
the Beatitudes, but his attitude would be wrong. Like, yeah.
So for us, we've just realized we've had to take it seasonally, and even in the season that we're in. So there's seasons where our kids are a certain age, but our life is really full. So we have to be realistic. Like we're not going to have communion every Sunday night. We're not going to light candles at Sabbath. And that's okay. But I think sometimes parents will ask, well, how do I get involved in my kids' discipleship? And I say, no, you're leading their discipleship. So to what Robert said, there are a lot of things oftentimes or people that can help cultivate growth, help cultivate the growth in the kids. But as a parent, it does matter that we lead and that we're intentional in the small ways that we can be to just know, what version of God are they getting, right? Because there's a version, you'll get a version from God from even people who say they don't believe in God. Even that's a version, right? So for us, it's, we use the analogy of the sponge all the time. Just think about your kids at the youngest age, they're a sponge and they're going to have a thought and a theology and a practice with God. And our job is just every day, how can we soak their little sponge more and more so that when it gets wrung out, they know God, and they may not be able to quote a Bible verse, but they know. Does that make sense?
Yeah. I although I was lamenting the reality of, the breakdown of the idealized vision that I had. I'm not giving up on that. And actually something really cool happened recently where my wife was going through some things in our girls' room, and she found like a little card. And it's so precious that I'm not going to say publicly what was written on the card, but it was one of my kids expressing some thoughts to God, almost like a little journal in like 2 sentences. But it was so articulate and it was so sincere. And my wife was kind of teared up about it. And I was reminded like, hey, keep singing the songs, keep reading the Bible verses, keep having the conversations, because it may seem like they are not taking any of it in, but something's getting in there and we're doing something right, even if it feels like chaos. And even if it's not, me teaching a Bible class to my 3 kids while they sit there and soak it up, that's not how it's going to look. And at the end of the day, I agree with what you said at the beginning, Robert. There's a lot of truth there where there's a weightiness to the responsibility we feel, but then at the end of the day, our kids, they're God's. And it's sort of like walking that fine line between, as you said, what is the role that I have to play? And then when am I taking on the full responsibility of this? And then at every turn, I feel like a failure. Because there's a lot of that goes on. And I don't know if you guys want